All right.
Wow.
Well, I've done something kind of strange here. Um, I scheduled this through Facebook to come on at 5 minutes to 2, and I think I scheduled this to come on YouTube at 2. So I sort of feel like I want to wait until this thing's going to show up on YouTube, and that way everyone's in. Oh, I'm echoing. That's strange. Hang on a second. Let's see if I do something here. Okay. Okay. Let me try this. Okay. Is that better, Sasha? Just wondering. I forgot to mute my iPad, so maybe that helps. Don't know. Okay, super. Thanks, Sasha. Appreciate it. Hi, Angelica. Nice to see you here. Well, what I could do is just reverse this camera. At least I can chat away. Hang on a second. Let's do this. Camera. I'll get this technology figured out eventually. It's great to see you guys. Thank you so much for showing up. Let's just do this. Oh, I don't mean to remove myself. Add to stream. I need to do this and solo. There we go. Wow. I'll find my way around. Anne, nice to see you. Anne, great question. Is the bed so large or is it the dog? Well, the dog is huge, an absolutely massive dog. And yeah, there wasn't room on the sofa for us when we were visiting this person. And I'm going to tell you all about that experience. We've got 3 minutes before this thing starts to go live on YouTube. So we'll just chat away here and say hi. Nice to see you, Andrew. I hope you guys have had a good week. I hope you've been painting, or at least getting inspired. I don't know what it's like in Austria right now, or in Germany. We had snow yesterday, the day before yesterday. We had some snow on the ground, which is insane when I think about it. That's Canada. You never know when we're going to get the snow. It can happen even to the next month. Great to see you, Andrew. Today's going to be interesting because I'm going to be doing something I haven't done for a little while. And so it should be okay. It's 1958 ATM, and we have spring weather, 18 degrees Celsius. Oh man, that's brilliant. Wow. And you tried the dominant color. Cool. Work good? That's good. Yeah, well, you know what? Don't beat yourself up over your painting. At least your colors are looking good. That's a great thing. You know, you can always just mush it around and do another one over top of it. Use the same color scheme, use the same dominant color, and all that color underneath is still harmonized, and it will still make a good painting over top of it. So yeah, it's a great way to work. Don't you worry about it. Sometimes I'll just take like a couple of colors and just cover a canvas. And today, one of the things I'm doing differently is I'm working straight into a white canvas, and I'll talk about that a little bit. I'm just waiting for this thing to click in for 2 o'clock and hoping this thing is going to show up on YouTube at 2. We're almost there. You guys, I presume you guys are watching this through YouTube. That's okay. If not, or I mean FaceTime, I don't know. Because this thing's supposed to be streaming to both locations. Anyhow, here we are at 2. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Great to see you. Thanks for joining again. We're all locked down again here in Canada, in Ontario for sure. The numbers are going up all over the world, and we're dealing with this pandemic still. One of my students from a group class calls me the pandemic instructor, which is really, funny and kind of sad too, because here we are. At least we're able to do this, and we're able to be online. Okay, and maybe these things are streaming both places, even 5 minutes early. I don't know how this works. Anyhow, if I can make my brushes work, I'm happy. Getting the technology to work is a whole other thing. Okay, I'm really glad that you've shown. I think I said that already. I want to go through a few different things today. A technique that I like to use, and I also want to talk about how to approach your painting. And if you saw my advertisement on Facebook, it's like, what the heck are we looking at? Or how are we looking at something? Something like that. I want to talk about the idea of making what you are looking at into shapes. I've talked about this before, or has certainly mentioned it briefly. One of the problems that we have as painters is that, at least I have as a painter, is I tend to look at an object and say, okay, well, that's an eye, that's an ear, that's a nose, there's a house. And so in my mind, I already have an idea what I think those things look like. So when I'm painting those things that I think I know how they look, that's what I end up putting on the canvas instead of, in fact, painting the thing that I see in front of me, which might be a house. But when you're taking information that's in front of you that is three-dimensional, and you're trying to put it into, well, you're putting it onto essentially a two-dimensional plane, but trying to create a three-dimensional effect, we have to find a way of breaking things down so that we're not confused by trying to see around corners or put in things that aren't there. And a lot of the time, we put stuff in and that isn't there. I do it all the time, and I just kind of look at it and think, like where did that come from? It's okay to put things in intentionally, having said that. Like if I'm painting trees, for example, and I don't like the way the branches work on a tree, or I want to change a branch or move the foliage, I'm happy to do that. And nature is very forgiving this way. But if you're doing something like a portrait, well, it's a little less forgiving. You can't kind of decide that, well, I want to move the nose over here, but I want to keep the eyes where they are, because then that just looks absolutely crazy. So what I want to do when I'm looking at the subject is to break it into its simplest abstract shapes. And when I say abstract, I've talked about this before. If I were to walk into your studio right now, well, you might wonder what I'm doing in there. But if I took in a camera and I took a photograph of your studio or the space you work in, and I enlarged it so it's like 10 or 15 stories high, that I have a great big print, and I cut a 2 foot by 2 foot square out of that print, you'd have no idea what that was. Like you look at that 2 foot by 2 foot image and say, that has no context. So that's what I'm talking about. If we break things down into shapes and they're relative to each other, and they're accurate, the drawing is accurate, when we see all those shapes together, we start to recognize those shapes as having a relationship to each other, which form a face, or a house or a tree or whatever it happens to be that we're painting. So if you can abstract things and look at relative shapes, that will improve your drawing. That'll improve your color and your value relationships as well, because then you're analyzing things almost as if you're sliding it through a microscope, you know, and I don't mean like you have to be really close to it, but you want to look at the shapes relative to each other. Angelica, yes, you're right. Picasso did move his nose to the other side of some of the faces, or their noses to the other side of faces, for sure. It's okay to distort things, and of course that's all part of being creative, and that's part of the process. But I think what I want to do, I'm hoping I can do today, is to make something look like the dog, the reference that I have. I'm just going to show you and tell you who this is, by the way. This dog is or was the pet of a fabulous artist. His name is Benjamin Björklund, and he lives in Sweden, in Uppsala, which is a tiny little place, not that far from Stockholm. My wife and I went to visit him, and this fabulous, beautiful dog was there with him. And you know, he's done a number of paintings of this dog, and he's worth looking up. If you don't know Benjamin Björklund's work, you should really look him up. I'm going to try and paint his dog. We took this photo of him when we were there, took a few photos, and I really like this one. Majestic creature, just beautiful. And you know, I love dogs. So and Benjamin was generous enough to, you know, visit with us. So we had a great time visiting him. It was just great. We had an afternoon, and he's again an amazing artist, young guy. And I think if you don't know him, you definitely want to look him up. I know he's very popular. So what I've done is I'm going to show you. Let's get back to this here. I want to show you what I'm working with today. The basic color for keeping everything in harmony today is this Payne's Gray. And you know, Payne's Gray is not a color I don't use this very often, I have to say. But it's kind of a nice, cool gray. You know, if you compare it to the warmth of my palette paper here, you can see it's a little cooler. It's got more blue in it. And I'm keeping generally a cool palette here because it's cool lighting. It's coming from a window. And of course, if you've got cool light, you've got warm shadows, which is really neat to remember. If you have warm light, you have cool shadows. If you have cool light, you have warm shadows. So I've mixed up a few colors just to kind of get me started here. And I'm going to try and stick to them as much as I can. But of course, I'm happy to change things when I need to. So the other colors I'm working with are ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson. I've got a Rublev Cypress Umber Dark, which is a little bit on the cooler side compared to the Cypress Burnt Umber. So these are sort of neutral colors to begin with. They're umbers. So there's not a lot of exciting color in it, but it's those sort of less exciting colors that make the other colors look nice against them. I've got a number of different tools here. I've got a little piece of rubber, which I may use here. These are interesting. This is like a little, we call this a spatula. And we use this in the kitchen. I stole this from the kitchen, and it'll probably never go back again because I've got paint on it now and then. And I haven't heard anyone missing it yet, so I'm lucky. Okay. I've got these things here, which are basically like a spatula, but you know, you buy these things with this rubber on the end of them, and I can use that for removing paint. I've got a couple of sizes here, and I have a few different sizes of brushes, some that are kind of pointy, I've got some filbert brushes. This is fairly soft, this brush. And I'm going to be moving some paint around with that stuff, with these brushes. I even have a couple of bigger brushes like this here. I don't know if I'll end up using them or not. So the approach that I'm going to take today is somewhat different because first of all, I'm going to work on a white ground. And I want to show you this as well. I don't know if this is going to come into focus. Maybe what I'll do, well, it might. Let's have a look and see if you can see that. This is Gamblin. It's an oil-based ground or primer, and it takes a little while to dry. It's like at least 3 or 4 days. And the board that I'm going to be working on is well, it's been drying for about 2 weeks, so it should be fine. In fact, I know it's fine because I've painted over this a couple of times and then just wiped it off again. And that's one of the nice things with an oil ground. The acrylic, for some reason, it doesn't wipe away as clean, and you wouldn't imagine that. You would think, being plastic, that it would be easier, but this oil ground is really nice for taking color off again. And this technique that I'm going to work with is less thick. It's a lot more transparent. And I want to really try and create my values and my colors working in a very thin, transparent way. If you happen to watch Stefan's classical painting of Vinzenz, it's very similar in a lot of ways to what he was doing there. So, except I'm going to try and get a little color going into it at the same time, and we'll see if it works. I'm just going to organize this here so I have a clean palette area. Oh, the other thing I have Q-tips here, which are really fantastic to work with if I want to take things away, paint away. The other thing, this is kind of funny, but I have a couple of old socks that aren't, well, they don't have any partners. So, or they have a hole in them. And so I use my old socks or my old t-shirts for wiping paint away. And that's really fun too, because, what else are you going to do with old socks when they're no good anymore? All right. I see Heike is here and Isabel. Great. This is great to see you guys. Nice that you showed Stelio and Petra. Wonderful. And Karina too. So super. Thank you for joining. Was New talking about the old socks? Oh, I didn't catch that one. Maybe he's talking about my old socks. Okay. I'm going to take you to, let's just do this here. Okay, there's the dog that I want to paint, but I want to take you to not there, not there, not there. Okay, oh, I know what's going on here. I actually have to switch the camera around. That would help. Here we go. All right, back camera. There we go. And oh, that's interesting. Okay, I just want to highlight this here. I think I actually have to do it this way. Solo layout. Wow. Now, if you didn't get dizzy looking at that, then there's a problem. Sashi said I have lots and lots of them. Yeah, I do have lots of old socks, and I keep using them for taking paint away. Okay. I'm just going to grab a brush, and I'll show you how I work this thing here. Let me just arrange this a little better. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a mark here, another one here, here, and here. And because you can't see the top of this board, because if I pull away, well, I guess you'd see it better. But anyhow, I've got a mark. These are 4-inch squares. If I were to actually draw it out, I'd have 4-inch squares. And that's just to give me a guide. And I haven't actually drawn right through it. I just want to have these on the edges so I know roughly what my proportions are when I look at my reference. And my reference is going to look like, see if I can do this, like this. I'll show you. This is, I've posterized the image of the dog, and that's kind of fun to do. And it breaks it into really big, simple shapes. And I can use those shapes as a guide just to give my paint down in the sort of the right places if I can. And you can see those lines that are over top of this image. And my board is in proportion. It's a square canvas board that I'm working on. And again, with an oil primer. So I'll go, I have an iPad that I'm looking at that has that image on it, but I'll go back to the dog. Oh, I should show you this. This is amazing. Just so you know, that's Benjamin's work, Benjamin Bjorklund, who I was talking about before. And that's his dog, and it's a stunning painting. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a big one, as I recall. And I just love his work. I'd be happy to get anything even remotely close to this. I'm not Benjamin, but I'll do it my way, and hopefully it'll turn out okay. And if it doesn't, well, it's been fun trying. All right, so here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is just go over the whole surface, pretty much, with Payne's Gray. And I'm just going to take a big brush, and I'm just going to put Payne's Gray over the whole surface. I could have done this ahead of time and just said, this is what I'm going to do, but I think it's kind of good to watch to see how this works. You'll see that I'm putting things down in a very thin way. I just want to get some good paint going all over the thing. And I might have to squeeze out more Payne's Gray before I'm done. This is going on dry. I'm not using any extra oil or medium into this. And what I'd like to do ideally is just cover this canvas as much as I can with a fairly even middle value. You'll notice this canvas has a fair bit of texture in it, and I've done that on purpose because I do like the way texture comes up through the paint. And I'm leaving these little areas right here where my guidelines are, so I can at least keep them in mind when I'm painting, so I can get my proportions right when I look at my reference. And this is interesting because it's sort of sticky, if I can say that. And yet it also comes off very nicely with the oil primer. So at this stage, it's just kind of getting some paint down. My whole easel is shaking away here. And a lot of this paint's going to come off again. But I'm hoping what I leave behind are shapes that end up looking kind of like a dog. And you know, if it looks like Benjamin's dog, well, that's a bonus. That'll be great. If it looks like someone else's dog, I'm okay with that too. It's a dog, so could be someone else's. All right. And you get some beautiful textures when you work this way, but I do want to smooth this out a little, because if I get too much texture going, then we get confused in our value relationships. And again, this is just straight Payne's Gray. That's all it is. And the brand is Winsor Newton, in case anyone wonders. Okay. All right. That's pretty much all I need. I want to make sure I have roughly the same amount of paint everywhere. And I will get one of my big brushes now at this stage and smooth things out. All right. Who hasn't seen any of my videos? Karina. Time to look at some of those other videos. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to use one of these soft brushes, this big one here, and I'm going to just draw the brush over top here and make it a little glare when I'm doing this. Okay. I just want to smooth things out. The beautiful thing about oil paint is that, you know, it takes a long time to dry and you've got time to work with it and you can really soften it out a lot. It's very flexible as a medium. You know, acrylic now it'd be almost dry if I put it on even that thick. And of course, that's one of the problems with acrylic. Or maybe I should say it differently. One of the best things about acrylic is that it dries quickly, and one of the worst things about acrylic is that it dries quickly. One of the best things about oil is that it dries slowly, and one of the worst things is that it dries slowly. It just really depends what you're trying to paint, right? So I'm just going to move this paint around randomly now so that I end up with an overall gray value. That's really what I want to do. And with the brush, I can press into it a little bit. I can move those darker areas into the light areas and then just smooth over it. Keep it going. Some artists will put medium in and just let it run down. That can look very nice too. It might be a nice demo to do sometime to show you how that works, because you get some beautiful random natural looking textures when you let the paint run down. It's kind of like watercolor that way. The paint builds up in the brush a little, so you know, it gives me a chance to put it on and take it off. It's sort of weird. If I press into it a lot, it takes the paint away, and if I am very gentle with it, it puts it on again. So I can also take more where if I get my my paint out here again and put it on top. A little more Payne's gray in the areas that are a little bit light. I'm just going to do that because I really want to try and get an overall value going as much as I can. And again, I could have done this before, but I think it's kind of neat to see this because, you know, it shows you the process, and you can try this, of course, in your own time. Do you get a feel for this after a while? You get to feel where, you know, you need to take the paint away and where you need to leave it. I'm going fairly dark with this at the moment. Once I go into it a little more, it'll lighten when I get the big brush going. Getting these textures, sort of knocking them down, the big soft brush is the way to do it. You can see with this brush here, it kind of picks the paint up a little bit as well. So it's just a bit of a patience thing. Just take your time and try and get this right. There was a time when I would take a rag and, you know, on bigger canvas, you can do it. I could do it here too if I wanted to. But you just take a rag and apply paint everywhere with a rag or an old sock. And that's a nice way of getting it really smooth as well. At this stage, it's transparent enough that I can see the board underneath. And that's one of the points of this, by the way. You know, shadows are relatively more transparent. So what I want to do when I pull the lights out, even though I'm taking paint away, I'm seeing more of the board and less of the paint. That makes sense. And by doing that, it makes it feel like there's more transparency in the shadows. So it's kind of fun the way that works. If you watch Stefan's classical painting video or live stream, You can see a lot of how that worked when he did the painting of incense. Now you can see I'm brushing over this very lightly, and I'm still getting the hair strokes coming through here. So I'm going to go over this very lightly now. And if you paint in different directions like this, vertically, horizontally, and on an angle through, you'll see that it starts to get smoother and smoother, even if there's a texture ground underneath, by the way. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. I'm not gonna, yeah, I'm getting, there's one end of that brush that's just picking paint off now. I'm gonna bring in another big brush. This is very soft. And let's see if it does a better job. Okay. So it doesn't pick up as much paint. Yeah, it does do a better job. It's a clean brush, very soft. I think I had a little bit of dried paint left in that other one I was using. And of course, if you have some dried paint in it, it's going to grab the surface. This one is better for sure. It's just a little cleaner. It also grabs the surface a little, but it's better than the other one. Okay, so I'm just going to keep this fairly random now. And I'm almost ready here to start. If you haven't decided to run away, that's good. All right, I'm just cleaning my brush off a lot, going into that, and I'm barely putting any tension on the surface right now. Very little. Now and then a hair will come out of the brush, and you can pick it out very, very carefully, because if you don't pick it out carefully, you end up destroying all that hard work of getting things smooth. Okay, that should probably do. Nice to see you, Nat. We are brush maniacs. Stefan has like hundreds of brushes, and I guess I probably do too. I've got a huge bag of them, and it's just amazing how they accumulate. That's for sure. Just cleaning my brushes off here now. I've got some paper towel. I want to get rid of this paint, excess paint, and just let that dry up a bit. Okay. Now, the brush that I put paint on with here, there's lots of paint on it. So I need to clean it down enough and hope that I can pull paint away. And I just want to see how this goes. I'm going to experiment a little bit here. I'm just getting rid of all the excess paint on my brush on some paper towel. I could use a fresh brush, but I want to use this one here and just see if I can get some of the drawing going. Let's see if I use the edge of it. Let's see if this will work. Yeah, I think it's going to. So all I'm doing right now is just sliding into this paint that is down on the surface and taking it away with this brush. And now and then just going and cleaning it out. And I'm looking for big shapes. That's what I'm looking for right now. The big shape of this dog's mouth. And I'm taking off the background. That's what I'm doing. I'm taking away the color. I can always put it back in again. You know, I can go over it and put it back in again if I want to. I think I'm going to grab a different brush here. And just because I'm drawing right now, I need a little more refinement. And I'm just looking at big shapes right now. It looks like I'm painting into this, but I'm not. I'm just taking color away. That's all I'm doing. I want to try and get these shapes working properly. Now this is where the famous sock comes in. I'm going to use this old sock here, and I'm just going to wipe away color here. You can draw with the brush and wipe away the larger areas with a cloth or paper towel. I like the cotton because it's very soft and it removes the paint quite well. And you'll notice it leaves a bit of a stain of the color behind, which, by the way, creates some color harmony. So that's kind of a bonus as well, since we talked about color harmony. You're not seeing the top of this. I should really pull back on it a little bit. Let me just see. I'm going to do this. There we go. So you can see the top part of what I'm doing. And of course, these old socks, they get mucky. So it's good to have a lot of them because you can get in and get a fresh one when you need one. Now, it's hard, as you probably know, to be very accurate when you're painting with a sock, but maybe that's a good thing because I'm just trying to get some shapes going here. I can always go back and bring in my other brush to get a little bit more of the original color in. That Payne's gray. After I've smoothed it all down, it's okay. If you like to draw with charcoal, or even if you don't, working with charcoal is a great way to practice this particular technique because you put charcoal down and then you pull out the lights. And it's a fabulous way of creating an effect that is quite believable fairly quickly. Okay. Now, I'm going to, there are two sort of really important areas in this. One of the focal areas is this dog's nose. And I just want to, oh yeah, this is where I can use a Q-tip. I can go in with a Q-tip and just get a little detail right in here. That's the edge of his nose. What I love about this is it doesn't work, but you know, my drawing's not very good. I can just block in a whole bunch of color over top of it again and start fresh. So that's one of the great advantages of working this way. It's very forgiving. And this is an area I'm trying to be careful with because it's an area that's going to be important in the end. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to go into a lot of lonely socks. I'm going to go into the rest of him right now. And what I want to do is I want to get the overall large shapes of what he looks like. So I'm just going to take away some of the background. And of course, as you get more oil into the sock, it leaves different values, right? So it gets a little darker over there because it's not taking as much oil up. So that's kind of good. And his ear, this is sort of fun because I can use a Q-tip to get a little bit of drawing going. And I want to look at his ear here. So his ear is going to come in here, up this way. And again, you know, I'm calling it ear, but really what I want to do is think about the shapes that I see in front of me and imitate those shapes. And his nose is going to go in here. And somewhere in here is a little shape for his eye. Okay. If he looks anything like this dog when I'm done, I'll be happy. And if he doesn't look, if he looks like a dog, I'll be happy. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go, well, very quickly, just draw the outside big shapes that I see here. And again, with a Q-tip, which is a nice way to work because I can go over these areas later and soften them down. And his collar, it comes in this way. It's just a shape that comes in this way, right there. And there's some kind of tag or something there. And again, I'm really trying to look for these big shapes. His leg is going to come out down here. Now, I can just check on my guides and just make sure that my shape for the leg is going to be in the right place. I've got my proportions. It's going to be in this way. And it's going to come in this way. There's a lot of dog in this image. There we go. It's a lot of dog when we met him in real life. It's a beautiful dog. And the back of him is going to go this way. This other kind of leg thingy comes down here. Okay, so that's kind of enough for me just to get that sort of in position. And now what I want to do is go and take some of the light areas out of his ear here. It's a really fun way to work. I love working this way because there's a certain random quality, and yet you still have to be somewhat accurate too, you know, to make it feel natural and right. Okay. And from this point here, he's lighter through here. And his leg comes down this way. And I can go back in, of course, at any point and fill in what I need to if it's not looking right, which I might end up doing. We'll see. If I'm really lucky, I'll get my drawing going right away. I see an area that's a problem already. So I'm just going to go into this with more paint right here. That's the great thing about working this way. I can work pushing and pulling the paint into the right position. Okay. And his other leg comes in this way, up there, and there's this shape here for his back leg there. And again, I'm looking at these big shapes. I'm trying to be somewhat careful, but not crazy careful, because I can always go back and draw in to these areas with more paint when I need to. I can see some drawing areas for sure that are not working. So I'm just going to go back into that. Just cover it over. If it's not working, get rid of it. That's the deal. Right now he looks like a bit of a cartoon dog. It's funny. Okay. I need to find a fresh spot on this sock. And I'm also going to grab another Q-tip and just try and get my drawing back a little bit so I have my edges in the right places. So from his ear here, I see a shape that comes down a little bit, and see this shape here. Okay, that shape comes all the way down this direction into here. Okay, fine. Okay. This is a really fun way to paint. You're right, Andrew. It's just really a blast. I'm going to grab some paper towel, and I want to go into this and just see. At this point, I want to get a little more sense of the form. And now I want to look at my, so I've been pulling out the lights. What I want to do is also look at the darks, and I want to put those in where I see them. Make sure I get both my positive and negative shapes working, right? So I see a shape that fits there, here, and this way, down that leg. And there's a bit of a shape that comes out towards his back paw, just he's got resting there. And his tail shows dark against a lighter background, which is kind of neat. I'm going to be a little more refined with that because it needs to look like a tail in the right place. And I'm just taking paint away. That's all I'm doing right now. You can let edges disappear into each other, by the way. That's another thing too, you know. We have an amazing ability as human beings to be able to identify shapes and recognize their relative relationship to each other. And really, that's what this lesson's about. It's the big shapes that make us recognize what's going on. I'm going to go in here, and this leg is a little finer. And go into the other side of the tail. Looking at angles, by the way, check your angles as you're drawing shapes or taking paint away. Really look at the angles to try and be accurate with those. In my drawing classes, I try and have my students learn to think about triangles, rectangles, squares, those kinds of things, so that you've got some structure to build on that makes sense. And that just helps create some drawing points that you can refer to. Okay, I'm going to go over this area again because I need to be more accurate here. And with a clean brush, I'm going to go into this here. This is his back leg. You know, believe the shapes you see. Don't try and decide, well, that's where the leg should be, or that's what it looks like, or it should look like. Try and paint the thing that's in front of you by shape. And if you do that and you focus on getting those shapes in the right places, you'll find out that in the end, it looks like it's supposed to look. I'm just going into the back here and defining the curve of the back of him. And starting to come together a little bit. Okay. Hey, Jerry. Nice to see you. I'm not paying as much attention to the comments right now. My apologies. Really trying to focus and make this thing work first before I do anything else. Now, he's sitting on a sofa, and the sofa comes up fairly high here, but I'm going to sort of do something to accentuate this focal area right here. And I'm going to take the sofa down a little bit lower. Might make him look even bigger. It's like a giant dog on a smaller sofa. So the sofa may go back that way on an angle. Okay. And he's also sitting on some kind of blanket or some kind of surface, which isn't white, but it's lighter. So I'm just going to go into this very lightly. This is just paper towel that I'm using. So it's not picking up as much paint as the sock does. It's okay. By the way, you can also use your fingers. If you do that, be careful. You don't want to put your fingers in your mouth later, or if you happen to have some gloves, that would be safer for sure. Now, I've been using brushes that are fairly stiff, so I can go in and I can soften some areas to get the structures working better. You can see with the paper towel, it leaves a little bit more paint down here. Oh, that's interesting. I'm looking at this and I'm realizing that I've got my dog looking a little too big through here. Not big enough back here. It actually should come a little higher. So I'm going to grab this sock here again and just try and pull this up a little more that way. Always being aware of shapes and proportions, and correcting wherever you can. You should correct. If you see something wrong, well, you know what? Maybe it's wrong. Like, just fix it. And the more paint I take off like this, the softer it gets in a way, and the easier it is to work with also. So, and also the paint very, very slowly dries, so it gets a little stickier, and sometimes that helps you as well because you can control it better. I've got the bottom leg too low compared to my image, so I'm going to bring it up to where it should be. If I were to draw a line across here between my 2 points that I'm paying attention to, his leg should be coming out this way, not where I had it. And that will be a better shape. Again, looking at those shapes, what are they saying to me? They're saying, I want to look like a dog, but I don't look like one yet. Okay. And if that leg does that, then the other leg is going to have to come a little higher this way. I'm just going to actually go right over that area. Just get rid of that stuff that's not working. And get a fresh sock because, because that sock was all full of muck. Now, the other thing you can do with this sock, this one I'm actually going to put my hand right into the sock. That's the other thing. I'm getting my hands really dirty right now because I'm grabbing the sock on the outside where I've used it to take paint away. So now I can actually draw with my finger. It's like finger painting when we were kids. And let's just do this. And you can see that's a more defined. This sock is not a cotton sock, by the way. This has got more polyester in it. So it's something I can get some really real detail going if I want to. Collar comes in here. Okay. And you'll see, like if I go into this with the polyester, how much more paint that takes away. Of course, I've taken a bunch away already, so that makes a difference too. But let's just see how this goes. I want to make sure that I get this shape working here. It's so important to get that right. And I'm going to go into the back behind him, take that away. Get that ear working. It's a beautiful sort of triangle shape that happens with his ear right there. And just sneaking into the shapes that make him look right. Never thought you'd see someone painting with a sock, did you? Today. Now I've got some funny shapes happening in his head. I want to get that right. That's a good question. Is it necessary to put color on top? There are times when I've just left a painting because I didn't feel it needed color. I'm going to try and bring some in, and I'm hoping that it'll look more interesting that way. Just got rid of his eye, by the way, because I want it to be in a better place. Sometimes it's not necessary to have the color. Sometimes it's just the tiniest little bit of color that it needs. And this is a case where you really don't have to overdo the color for sure, because everything will be harmonized with the color that you put down. Get his eye in the right place, right in there. And just the tiniest little bit of detail here will be the white in his eye. Just want to look at this a little closer in my reference. There. Doesn't take a lot. Okay. Now I want to go into this area here and just make sure I've pulled the shadows into the right place. When I press into the brush, it takes more paint off, and then I clean my brush off right away, and that gives me a chance to get lighter values going. I'm going to put a little bit more dark right up against the bottom of the eye there, right in there too. And the other area I want to be aware of is, again, this nose, which is so important. Make sure I've got darks where I need them. And this is the case where I can put the paint in a heavier way. You may be getting a bit of glare, I don't know. This is such a fun way to paint because you really can keep playing with the shapes for as long as you want until they look right. Again, one of the joys of oil. Okay. And you can bring these values back from the darker areas into the light areas. You can soften them off with a brush, bring them back that way. Again, really being aware of values. The little shadow that comes away from his ear here. And you just keep moving the paint around until it looks right. Really, it comes down to that in the end. I want to get more dark into the front of his muzzle. And as I said earlier on, the oil primer that's down here is very slippery. So it gives you the chance to keep working it. Okay. I want to use my finger here just to soften a couple of spots. All right. Okay. Now the other thing, there's another technique here I want to show you. When you want to get sort of your halftones, I can just tap into this and that will still remove the paint, but it doesn't take it off in the same way as when you swipe through the paint. So when I do that, I can build shapes up that look more believable, that feel right. You can see how that works. And that's a technique I can use even up into here. When you do that, of course, it looks like a lot of little fingerprints. So you can take a very soft brush. I'm just going to grab a very soft brush and just gently smooth that over. And when you do that, you end up with kind of a halftone area. Just manipulating this paint. You're really constantly drawing with your brush, looking for simple shapes that tie it all together. Really try and keep your shapes big so that the larger structures work. If the larger structures work, then the painting makes more sense. I'm going to go into this and just take a little paint away here. Again, this is with a soft brush. So just keep cleaning it off. I can go back in and smooth it down. Take a little more away where I want to. If any of you are working with charcoal, this is a process that really is intuitive. If you're used to working with charcoal, this is a nice way to come at your painting. You can see I picked some color up here, but I can push it back to where it belongs. It belongs there. Now I want to get a sense of where the chest of this dog is here. So I want to work the values so that it makes sense, and you get a sense of the front of this dog here. And right now I'm just sort of dragging a little paint away. I can lose edges here, it's okay. I just want to get a feel of the overall shapes. There's a little area I'm looking up near his nose that's important because it's kind of the top of his nose in here. Again, little shapes that pull together. All right, now let's see what the overall looks like. Okay, it's coming along. I want to get this area working down here. What I like is that there's this sort of random thing that happens when you're working this way, and sometimes the shapes just look right, and when they do look right, you leave them alone. I'm going to go in a little more aggressively to the light areas that I see. There's one near his paw down here. And I'll use a Q-tip to bring a little bit of light that comes into this area here. And there, light picks up on the back of them a bit. And there too. Okay. That's funny. And it might look better if I put my foot in a sock. It could be fun. Why not do a giant painting like this? Put the canvas on the ground and walk around on it and see if you can create a painting that looks like something we'd recognize. Put a mirror on the ceiling so you can see what you're doing. Just keep looking up and walking around. Footprint paintings. Why not? I want to go into something a little darker here. I'm not trying to get into the anatomy of this dog. Okay, so I'm really trying to look for those big shapes and keep it super simple. With, I'm squinting the whole time, by the way. That's something that's really important to remember to do. Keep squinting, because squinting forces you to look at the big values. It's time to get rid of that little blob up there. Okay, time to get rid of that blob there and down there too. So those were my markers. Remember, I had them at every 4 inches when I first started. Okay, now I'm going to squeeze out some more Payne's Gray. So it's going to give me a very slight rest, and you want to. It's surprising, for how thin this is, how much paint it actually uses. course, it's fresh paint. It's not as dry, so that may be a little slipperier and go over top of the paint that's underneath. And you can't see this. I need to clean my hands a little bit too. Fortunately, it's not cadmiums I'm working with or cobalts or anything like that. Okay. I just want to create some softness in some of these areas. I'm looking at the overall. It's really important now and then just to get a bit of distance from your work, get back from it, and get the mood working. This is sort of an intuitive thing. I can't explain exactly what I'm doing here. I just want to soften some edges so that the dog is more important than everything else that's going on. And the background's not important. Although at some point I might put a little color into the background, but really I want to keep the attention on the dog, right? That's the thing. And I want to create a background that looks interesting but doesn't interfere with the main focal area. So that's just some stuff that goes through my head. No one knows what's going on back there. Is it a wall? In reality, it was a wallpaper behind him that had a pattern. Maybe that might be interesting in a painting. I don't know. But for now, I'm just going to do this kind of thing. You could be sitting anywhere now. It's not even a sofa now. So, okay. I'm going to go in with a soft brush now and just start to paint up a little more detail. The soft brush puts the paint down in a more consistent way. So you can see as soon as I do that, I get some rich darks. In order to show a dark, though, you have to have a lighter area against it. So I'm going to use the same soft brush and just take a little paint away here. In fact, I'll just drag right through that whole area. Take more paint away. The bristle brush is a little harder to get these smooth transitions with, but the soft brush, you can see, even when I press into it, this takes it away nicely and it still keeps it rather smooth looking. And I get those nice halftone shapes. Then when I go back in with the darks, beside that, again with a soft brush, it will look a little more dramatic. That leg in the background, just going to take a little more paint away. Actually, that's interesting. When I look at that, it's not his leg at all. It's actually the sofa behind, and his leg is very low and it's dark. Okay. Again, want to look at the shapes. I'm not sure what the shape means sometimes, but I know that if I imitate what I see, that it will look right when I'm done, hopefully. So there's a lighter shape that comes in here, and I see that carries up to his chest this way. I'm just using this very soft brush to take a little paint away, and again, it's a little bit transparent, so we're seeing a little more of the ground behind the gesso. And his leg actually comes up this way. It's interesting. It's one of the great things about drawing and painting. It forces you to really look at things. Trust your eyes. Don't trust your brain. Trust your eyes when it comes to this stuff. Okay, I'm going to go in with a couple of more darks just to bring up a little more detail where I need to. And you can see when I took those values out of there, that when I put these darks in against it, it's just with really fresh paint that it shows better. Thanks, Heike. I'm really having fun doing this today. I mean, I have fun painting every day. I really do. But sometimes when you're working on an image, you just kind of get frustrated. And it's really important just to keep yourself fresh, keep having fun with it. Take a break when you need to. When I'm doing these live streams, I'm not taking much of a break. But when you're painting in the studio, in your own time, put on some music and relax. If you need a glass of wine, and you put on your favorite songs and give yourself a break on a regular basis so that you feel fresh and relaxed when you're working. Because that kind of energy shows in your work. It just does. It's hard to explain why, but it does. I want to get a little bit more this muzzle area here. That's an interesting shape there. Again, I'm using a soft brush, just pushing into this. And I want to show that little shape that comes away from his nose there. And I think I can come across this area here and work those values out. I'm going to go back in with this shape here. Sometimes you can go a little crazy with shapes, by the way. I guess that's the point of this whole demo anyhow. Just keep your shape simple. As the paint gets a little drier, it's a little easier to manipulate somehow. It's strange how that works with oil. Oh, that's not good. I just dropped my brush. Fortunately, I have a good mat beneath me, so no danger, no problems. Now you see I'm pushing the brush in the opposite direction to what you would normally paint. That takes paint off. So that's a nice way to work. If you want to take paint away, if you put it down the regular way, it puts it down. If you push the brush the other way, it takes it off. That's like magic. Okay, I'm going to tip that up a bit so you can see that a little better. Yeah, you're right, Sasha. We're going to get these colors going. How are we doing for time? Well, we're good. And you'll see that it takes very little color to make this thing happen, hopefully. Going in with the Q-tip again. That's an important little thing right there. And I also want to get this shape coming away from the back of him. Is it that collar sort of falls into a fold in the skin. And I want to pick up a little light that's just on the tip of his ear here. But Payne's gray is one of those funny colors. It's sort of, it's cool, and it sort of feels a bit like graphite to me when I look at it. And it's not like the most exciting color, I have to say. I know a lot of artists use it, but it sort of just feels a little cold. I can say that. So once you start getting a little bit of color into this, a little goes a long way. Okay. Now I've done something. I've brought thinner into my brush, and what did I do there? I just knocked this other camera out of the way. Okay, not that you're seeing it. Okay, so when I do that, of course, it really takes lights out because now I've got some thinner in it, and that is going to create another whole layer of values, those light values, which is good because now I have another level to go to. And again, this is a very soft brush. I haven't used this rubber thingy yet, so I'm just curious to see if I can make this work. Just moving the paint around. This is the area that's important. And now I'm trying to think a little bit abstractly. I want to take this. Okay, I need to bring a little bit more. I got to get the shape of his head right, so it's actually up in here more. Now, I want to do this and see if this works. Okay, this is a case where I think just a clean brush with a bit of thinner in it, and I can pick up that edge against his. That's an important shape right there. Just trying to clean colors out here and some values and just get this working. Soften it down in a couple of places. Not too much detail here. We don't want the eye to be going beyond where it should. One thing Stefan, I like, he does this where he goes across the edges and he's not afraid to, you know, let things fly out like that. Okay. All right. I think I'm getting close to the point where I can start to bring a little color in. Before I do, I want to lighten this area here a little more, going with the old sock. There we go. Okay. The other thing I notice when I'm looking at this, it's funny, when I'm looking at this screen, I see the shapes and values a little better because they're reduced down on the screen. So it's kind of a neat thing to be working if you have an image in front of you that is smaller. So if you're working and you have a chance of projecting that in some way onto an image that's a little smaller, it gives you a better sense of the overview, especially when you're working close as I am right now. Typically, I would be moving back and forth in the studio and trying to look at it from a distance, because then you really see the whole thing better and the relationship of shapes to each other better. And that's really preferable. But at least this way, when I see it on a screen like this, it gives me an opportunity to have a look at it smaller, and that's kind of neat. I've got like this massive head on this guy, but according to the image I have in front of me, it's fairly on. It's not too bad. So I don't mind if it's slightly exaggerated either. It's okay. Okay. I think I'm ready. You can see I'm really resisting getting to color too soon. But here we go. All right. So there are a few different ways that I can apply color. Of course, with a brush, that's an option. I'm going to clean my brushes off here just quickly, the ones I've been using. And the other way I can apply color is with an old sock. They're handy for that too. Or a Q-tip, or rags, or a palette knife. So, you know, you've got lots of options for applying the color at this stage. And I'm going to introduce a little bit of color. I think I'm going to start with a brush. That's what I'll do. And I'm going to start with a gray. This dog is really like it's a beautiful color. What I've shown you, well, you've seen what he looks like. I'm going to go in with some opaque color right now and just start applying it loosely where it goes. When I say loosely, you know, accurately also, hopefully. And I don't want to get too much color going, honestly. I want to keep it fairly thin and fresh. And this is a point where I have to be aware of my values, but I can continue to correct while I'm painting. I can even apply this in a way that's as thin as the values are behind. So it's an option. I just got a gray going here, which is a combination of the Payne's gray and a little bit of one of the umbers. Or yeah, it's a raw umber that I've got going here. And this is the cooler versions. I'm applying this with a very soft brush. You can see how it picks up some of the textures here. That's kind of nice. I like that. If it's nice, you like it, leave it. And of course, it's mixing a little with the color that's underneath. So that creates a sense of harmony. And it helps that the values are worked out. Now he gets a little bit pink under here. I'm just going to throw a little bit of that in there. Almost see his belly there. And I'm going to put a couple of spots where he's pink. His private parts right in there, they're pink too. And there's a little area up in here. And that's quite a little focal area right there. So I'm even going to put in a more intense pink. I need a finer brush for this. Because that is really a little focal area right there. It's very subtle, but there's something that's working about that. Okay, going back to this cool color, I'm going to bring a little bit of pink into that cool color so that it keeps a little more attention in his muzzle. And there's a nice shape that comes in from up here. Having done the value study like this, it gives you an opportunity to know where to put these other colors. Okay, still into the grays here. Do try and imitate the shapes that I see as much as possible. And at this stage, you can still be fresh and loose. You don't have to get really super detailed. Because the paint underneath is quite thin, if I put in heavier color on top, it stays nicely. And I'm just letting the brush do the work here. Okay, it's going okay. There's a nice, lighter, cooler color that happens, and it looks like it even has a bit of pink in it as well. And that happens over top of the colors that I've just been painting. So I'm going to put that in there, and we'll see what that looks like. Just really letting the brush do the work here. You get these nice shapes that happen. Trying to draw with the brush as much as I can. Being aware of the shapes. Again, this is the deal today, is get the shapes right. You can always go back and refine things where you need to. You notice I'm painting into the lights. I'm not actually painting into the darks right now. So in some ways, I'm kind of doing everything the opposite way. I put it down dark, pulled out the lights. Now I'm putting lights back in, and then I'll go into the dark areas after this. So it's almost working, in a sense, the opposite way to what you'd think you would do, because typically you'd paint the darks first, right? And then you go over those darks. That's the classic way. But we'll see if it works this way. Maybe it won't. Well, I hope it will. Okay, that was fun. I'm going to go back into... Rita, are you having some trouble with your screen? It's looking okay for me here so far. I think I am going to pull back a little bit though, so that shows a little better. There we go. Could be the autofocus thing interferes sometimes. So, okay. All right. Now, I want to bring in some of the cooler, well, actually, when I say that, actually the warmer colors in the shadows, but there are also some cool colors behind this guy. So I want to try this, some of the cooler blue colors that I see that were on the sofa. And I will find out if this is going to work. I have pre-mixed these colors in hopes that it would be okay. And I'm just going to allow these shapes to kind of soften and abstract. And of course, with the Payne's gray behind, it picks up that Payne's gray and harmonizes, creates its own gray values. Let's see, right about there, and there, and there. After I've done all the soft edges, I'll go back and soften them again if I need to. I'm going to go in with a little darker blue, bring some Payne's gray into that so that we have some strong darks in here. just getting some of these colors working makes such a difference. Even just a little bit like that, I think. Going to behind him this way. There's the tiniest touch of violet that happens back in that area. I don't know if it's important, but I'm going to put it in. Nice thing about this is that you can continue to soften where you want to, but you have to be careful also that you don't get too fussy, too soft with things, because that can be dangerous. You know, you start getting too precious about it. I want to get this sense of light coming over here. And maybe it picks up a little on the top of the sofa. There, if it picks up there. I'm going to go back into that dark and just correct that there a little. And I want to soften this edge right here so that the back of him falls away, that background. Okay. Can fuss away at those things a long time and they don't make a big difference. So all right. Now I want to get into some colors in the shadow areas on him. It's really one of those things, a lot of people wonder what to do with backgrounds. So they paint the subject, they don't paint the background. And then later on, they have to figure out what colors to put in the background. And it's very frustrating. It's one of the questions that comes up with me regularly in my classes. And I always say, if you can, try and paint the background first, if possible. It's not always possible. I want to get a little color going in this area here, so that when I do paint these other colors into the shadow, it looks like somehow or other they belong. Jerry started with a whole board. Yeah, thanks, Sasha, for explaining that. I started with a whole board. Basically, this kind of value here everywhere, and then just started pulling the lights out with rags, socks, all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm going to go into the shadow areas here, and I'm hoping that my value will be okay. I think it should be okay. And it's cool light, warm shadow. So just these warmer colors hopefully will be enough to make it feel like there's a right relationship between light and shadow. And it looks like I could lighten that just a little. It feels a little bit too dark. So I just added a little bit of white, which cools it. So you have to be careful because it is warmer shadows. But you also know that color and shadow is less intense than color and light, right? So you want to make sure your shadow colors are somewhat neutral compared to the colors that are in the light. Getting that combination to work is always that challenge. And right now he's looking like he's got, it's a dual colored dog, which is funny because when I posterize this, of course, that's what happens. It breaks it into very specific colors. And I don't mind, I'm actually just trying to interpret what I'm seeing here. I don't have to make it look like a photo. If I was trying to paint this in a very classical way, I'd probably be a lot more careful about my colors. But I'm sort of really more interested in making an interesting painting than trying to make it look super realistic. And it's fun to work this way. You can see I'm not being super concerned about my drawing here. I just want to chunk some color in because I can always go back and correct things where I need to later. I'm not putting super heavy paint down, so it's easy enough to make changes if I want to. Okay, so I'm going to do something here. I've got the big shapes pretty much where I want them. I'm now going to take one of those big brushes that I had before. And again, this can work or it can be a total disaster. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. But I just want to go over these areas and let them find their way together. I'm just going over edges that I want to make a little smoother. And I can go back over this again and accent where I need to. Every time I do this, I'm cleaning my big brush off. And it does something interesting when you do this because it kind of pulls it all together somehow. To go easy though, if I press in too hard, then it starts to look really crazy. It starts blending too much. The areas that have the focal areas, you have to be a little more careful so you don't blend it too much so it doesn't look like it's out of focus, right? So when you do this, it just creates a sense of peripheral. It creates a softness. That's all it does. And I think these blues back here certainly can afford to soften down. You can see how the textures pick up in the background. That's how thin this paint is. I can take paint away this way as well. I want to be careful I don't get too technique-y here. Okay. All right, I want to get a little something going down in here. It's kind of a bland area. And I think I'm going to go in with, maybe I'll keep it a little bit like on the yellow side. Let's just try this. See if that works. So we're not looking at Payne's gray everywhere. And of course, if I've got that color there, I might want to pick a little of that color up in here because this is like some kind of sheet or something that he's got on the sofa. Big dog like that, you want to have a sheet on the sofa for sure. Bring a little more color here. I just want to differentiate this from what's going on up here, that's all. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to go into the background a little bit more. I mixed up a violet earlier, and I'm sort of curious to see if I can make that work through this area. This may look really crazy. Maybe it won't work. We'll find out. There's definitely more chroma here than maybe that I need. But it's kind of a nice color. So let's just bring it in here. And again, that wet Payne's gray that's underneath is helping to harmonize this. There are grays going on. I'm going to bring that into here too. You know, the focal area is really still on his head. It's okay. And because I have that violet there, I can play a little bit here and put it in a few other spots. I'm going to bring it into areas that drop into the shadow here and there. That's the thing when you harmonize your colors ahead of time. You can do this sort of thing and get away with it because the colors have a relationship this way. You have to go easy. You can go too crazy on this too. So I'm going to bring a little more of a blue violet into a couple of areas. A little darker. Picks up that wet paint that's underneath. Maybe there's a bit in under there. And maybe even in the nose. Right there. A couple of spots in here. Now I'm just really honestly playing with color. I'm not trying to get too, to be careful you don't get pedantic. You also have to be careful you don't get too clever. You want to keep it honest, colorful, interesting, you know, something that has enough in it that you want to keep looking at it, but you don't want it to look like it's product. It's just, you know, intuitively putting in some color where you think it's needed. I'm trying to look at the whole painting here really as much as I can so that it feels like it's cohesive, like things belong to each other. I'm going to go into that violet, just put a little spot right in here. There as well. Just looking for little shapes that I see, abstract shapes that may help add to the structure. If that makes any sense. it just comes out this way. I am drawing a little bit, but again, still really trying to keep looking for shapes. Okay. Now I'm super tempted to get a little bit of a palette knife thing going because I feel like I need to have some texture near a couple of spots. We never really see pure white in a painting. So whenever I get white going, I always bring a little bit of color into it. And really what it should be is the color of the light. Now, the light here is cooler. I'm going to bring in a violet, which has blue in it, but it's got the slightest bit of red too. So let's just do this. And this is probably so subtle you can barely see it. I'm working with Permelba white here, by the way, which is just a beautiful creamy white. And it just is so buttery. It's nice to work with. I have to order it up from the US because I can't get it here in Canada. But it's not expensive paint. It's, you know, compared to Old Holland, wow, it's a lot more economical. And again, the focal area is really around his head, so you can have those sharp edges there. I like the random shapes that come away from a palette knife. I know I talked about this before, but you know, your brush just doesn't make these kind of shapes. It gives you some nice texture. And the neat thing is with that gesso that I have underneath here, it picks up these textures and creates these random spots that kind of happen in nature. You know, it's the texture of a wall behind maybe. I'm going to go back into the white now. I just got a little bit of color I didn't want to get here. Hang on. Which means I have to squeeze out some fresh Permelba. If I didn't show you this before, I think I did before, but this is what that looks like. It's called Permelba white. Well, I've really exaggerated the size of this dog's head. It's okay, I don't mind. It's like I seem to be exaggerating things lately. But, you know, painting from feel. Yeah, I've got a grid up and I'm looking at trying to keep things proportionate. But in the end, I'm actually more interested in a painting that looks curious and wants to keep the viewer looking at it. So I'm not going to get too hung up on it. Okay. Again, with the white, I'm bringing in a bit of violet. And this time I'm going to bring in a little bit of yellow as well. So the yellow and violet are complement colors to each other. It's going to give me, I've got it more towards the yellow. It's a yellow ochre. And I want to do some stuff down in this area here so that it just has a little bit more oomph, a little bit more interest up against this tail. And it kind of feels like a bit of light hitting there. There too. I'm not going to try and get in all the drapery and all that stuff that happens. It's not necessary. I'm doing something here that really isn't something you would normally do, which is to have a strong edge here going off the edge of the canvas, but I'm going to do it anyhow. The heck? I can always soften it later if I want to when I look at it. And maybe I'll just pick up a little bit of light over here. It's actually not there in the photo, but I just sort of feel like it needed it. Okay. Now I'm going to go, what are we time-wise? Oh, wow. It's like 4 o'clock almost. Holy smokes. Okay. Kind of got into it today. So maybe what I should do is wrap this up very shortly. I'm just going to put a couple of darker areas in behind here so that that drops away. So there's more color around the dog than there is in the dog. And that's one way of working. You can keep your subject less colorful, the background more colorful. And when you do that, it still creates a focal area on the subject that you want people to look at. I'm just going to chunk some color in here. I may work on this a little longer and then post it so you can see what it looks like when it's done. But I'm hoping this at least gives you the idea, and I'm hoping there was something today that you learned or something that was interesting for you. I'm gonna call it, and I'll just come back to you so you can see what that looks like now. And again, I'll do a little bit more work on it, not a whole bunch. I think I've got my point across. And I'll just switch cameras up here. Okay, I need to go here, here, front camera, here we go, and I'm back. Thanks for those of you who stayed with this all this time. I had no idea, like I totally lost track of time today. Usually I try and keep it an hour and a half or an hour and 45 max. But it's a really fun way to work. I really like working this way. As you can see, I get really wrapped up in it. And there are a lot of ways that you can push this further. You can get more detailed, you can be more realistic, more figurative. And of course, you can always change the drawing. And if you don't like it at the end of it, you can take a big old sock or a rag and just wipe it right off the canvas. So I've done that more times than I want to admit because it wasn't working. So again, working on an oil prime is really nice because you have this opportunity of wiping things away and working into it and changing your mind as you go. So that was one of the points I wanted to make today. I also wanted to mention Benjamin Bjorklund, look him up. I also wanted to mention or talk about in this process, the idea of looking at big shapes, get the big shapes first, get those working, and then work smaller and smaller and look at your image as if it's an abstract. So Anne's going to buy herself a dog. I see that. Great. Thank you. This is all good. It's good for the dog business. And Stilio, thanks. Yeah, it's fun to do this. It feels like a bit of magic to me too. So Sasha, thanks for joining. The big old sock dog. Yeah, it's true. It's a sock dog. We had a dog one time who had some difficulty with his nerves, his nervous system, and he used to drag his paws. So we used to put socks on his paws, and that helped a bit. Anyhow, speaking of sock dogs, thanks everyone. Please, if you are not subscribed, please do that. I love the thumbs up when I get them. And I'm going to say today that I'm trying to get more subscription because once I reach 500 subscribers, and if you pass this on to your friends so they know, once I reach the 500 subscriber mark, someone's going to end up with a painting and a value of, well, we'll say 400 euros. Okay, and it's going to be a random draw. So anybody who wants to get into that draw, if you're already subscribed, you're already in it. But I'm going to wait till I reach 500 before I do this giveaway. And I may have a couple of other giveaways that come with this as well. So I'm trying to promote my live streams and my channel. So please, if you know anyone who's interested, and again, younger students who can't afford to take classes, by all means, please mention it to them, and we'll see what we can do. And thanks again. Stay safe. Enjoy the nice weather, social distance, and all that stuff you need to do. But we'll see you next week. Thanks so much. I appreciate you showing up. Take care.